Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us today for today's webinar. This webinar, Accessible Instructional Materials, or AIM, is AIM Right for Your Child, is being presented by the Delaware AIM Center and facilitated by Parent Information Center of Delaware. My name is Midra Surratt, and I am with Parent Information Center of Delaware, who is a statewide nonprofit organization that works with families of children with disabilities and special needs. Today's presenters are Annalisa Ekbladh and Beth Minio. Annalisa is the project coordinator for the Family Shade Project, which connects families and professionals to resources for children and young adults with special health care needs. In addition, Annalisa is working with a consortium of agencies to implement a statewide plan for services for individuals with autism spectrum disorders. Beth Minio is the director of the Center for Disability Studies, director of the Assistive Technology Unit at the Center, and associate professor in the School of Education. Beth has extensive experience in project design and implementation, services for individuals with disabilities, assistive technology development and utilization, and research and evaluation. Just a few housekeeping rules. For those of you that are calling on the phone, if you could hit *6 to mute your phone, and that way that eliminates any background noise. We will have an opportunity for questions. However, we do ask that questions are held until the end of the presentation. So without further ado, Annalisa, if you want to start.
Yeah, thanks, Midra. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today to talk about Accessible Instructional Materials, or AIM, and what parents should know about getting and using AIM in the classroom. Again, my name is Annalisa, and joining me today is Beth Minio, the director of the Delaware AIM Center. First off, I wanted to start by showing a brief video that was produced by the Pacer Center that gives a really good overview of AIM. So let me get that going here.
Every day, we read for pleasure, to get information, to do our assignments, and we read at work to do our jobs. Text is all around us, and we use it every day to help us navigate our way through the world. But when a disability makes it difficult to access text, we may need a little help. Fortunately, help is available. Welcome to Understanding Accessible Instructional Materials, inspired by commongraph.com. Sometimes children have disabilities that prevent them from accessing print in the same way their peers can. Someone with a visual impairment might not be able to see the print in a book. A person with a physical impairment might not be able to turn the pages of a book or be in a good position to read. And someone with a reading disability like dyslexia might not be able to figure out what the words really mean. To succeed in school, these students need learning materials presented in a way that works for them. We're going to talk about two parts of AIM, the content and a way to interact with the content. First, let's talk about the content. These types of learning materials are called Accessible Instructional Materials, or AIM. If elementary and secondary students with disabilities need AIM, then schools are required to provide these in a timely manner. If you think your child needs accessible instructional materials, bring it up with your IEP team. You and the other members of the IEP team determine if a student needs to receive the same content as other children in one or more specialized formats. There are 4 different specialized formats available: Braille, large print, audio, and digital text. The right formats are chosen based on how a student will access the information contained in printed materials, which format lets them work as independently as possible, which format will help the student develop literacy skills, and which format will let them successfully participate and make progress in general education curriculum and on IEP goals. You have some information about the content. Now let's talk about ways to interact with the content. The IEP team determines what else is needed. It could be technology, such as a digital audio player, training for students, family, and school staff, accommodations, such as a quiet place to listen to audio files, or specialized provides instruction to learn how to use audio, Braille, or other formats. Coordinated services between teachers, physical therapists, occupational therapists, and others. Or support services to maintain equipment and support the use of technology. So now you know a little more about accessible instructional materials, but you may have some specific questions about AIM. There are many resources available to help you learn more. These include Accessible Instructional Materials, AIM, Basics for Families. Accessible Instructional Materials, AIM, a technical guide for families and advocates. The AIM Navigator, a free online tool to help teams make decisions about a student's need for AIM and how to meet that need, and many more. This has been Accessible Instructional Materials in Simple Language, brought to you by the Pacer Center, in collaboration with the National Center on Accessible Instructional Materials, where help is always available.
So in talking about AIM, we're going to talk about a few considerations that parents need to know about today on this webinar. So we're going to discuss who needs AIM, how AIM is selected for the student, how AIM is acquired, and lastly, how AIM is used in the classroom and at home. I'm first going to talk about who needs AIM and how that's determined in Delaware. Special education law is very clear about the rights of students with print disabilities to get print materials in a format that works best for them. IDEA requires that textbooks and instructional materials be provided to students with print disabilities in a timely manner. And Delaware interprets a timely manner as meaning that AIM are received at the same time that other students receive their materials. So what students can get AIM? For decades, access to AIM was limited to the top categories here: students with blindness, visual impairment, physical disabilities, and reading disabilities that have an organic basis. There's been a lot of confusion over the years about what that last category really means. So happily, Delaware has made eligibility a lot more straightforward. Although students can still qualify in the above categories that I just mentioned, eligibility is really based on the individual student's profile. Students are eligible for AIM if they are found by the IEP team to have a print disability and if the need for AIM is documented in their IEP. So I'll talk more about how the team can assess needs coming up. So how do I know if my child can qualify for AIM? There are three main considerations. Number one is, does your child struggle with print? And struggling with print can play out in many different ways. It can be difficulty seeing the print, decoding print, or being able to track across the page, or even having trouble turning the pages of a book. Number two, does having the material in accessible formats make a difference for your child's learning and performance? There must be a demonstrated advantage to the student in order for them to be qualified for AIM. And I'll talk more about how the school and the IEP team can use certain assessments to determine if there is an advantage in using AIM. And number three, the child must have an IEP. And the presence of a print disability and the need for AIM must be documented in that IEP. So a key point is talk to your child's teacher and IEP team and about getting that assessment. So what assessment? What are we talking about? What kinds of assessments are out there? So in the last slide I mentioned that in order for a student to qualify for AIM, there must be a demonstrated learning or performance advantage, and that there are certain assessments that the school can use to see if Alternative formats really make a difference for your child. So one of these assessments is the PAR, or Protocol for Accommodations in Reading. And this one is used very commonly to determine the need for AIM. Another assessment is the QRI, or the Qualitative Reading Inventory, and this one also compares how students do with the same level of text across different presentation conditions. Special education personnel in Delaware should be familiar with one or both of these assessments if you bring it up in your IEP meeting. Now I wanted to talk a little bit about selecting AIM. As mentioned in the video, there are 4 different categories of AIM. The first is Braille, which is a tactile writing system used for students who are blind. It's traditionally delivered using embossed paper, but can also be delivered by assistive technology devices. Digital text is content that comes in an electronic file. You must have a device such as a computer or iPad to access the digital text. Digital text offers a lot of flexibility, and you can change the size, the color of the font, and the text size. And also, depending on the device, you can even have the text read aloud. Large print is exactly that, but it can also include what we call modified presentation, which might mean the insertion of more space between words or lines, or the elimination of distractors on the page, such as text boxes and tips. And the last type of AIM is audio, which is in which the text is read aloud using a recorded human speech or a text-to-speech function of a computer or tablet. So selecting the right type of AIM for your child is a decision that's made with your IEP team. The assessment that I mentioned before, the PAR or the QRI, will help the school to identify the type of AIM that really gives your student that learning advantage. So families can also play a big part here and can help jumpstart the process of selecting AIM by sharing any experiences that you might have had using large print or read aloud or other forms of AIM. It's really a team effort when selecting the right kind of material. So once you and the IEP team have established that your student has a need for AIM and you've selected a format that works for your student, it's time to acquire those accessible instructional materials. It's the school's responsibility to acquire those materials. The schools have been trained by the Delaware AIM Center on how to request materials and how to make sure that the copyrights are protected. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit into using AIM, but I want to stress how important it is to be thinking about and acquiring the delivery tool at the same time as the materials. And what we mean by the delivery tool is how is that AIM going to be delivered to your student? Is that through paper? Is it an audio player or a laptop or an iPad? Digital text won't do too much good without the device to display the digital text. So talk to the IEP team about that delivery tool at the same time you're talking about what the AIM that you're selecting. So back to acquiring AIM. So Delaware's goal is to deliver AIM at the same time as that other students are receiving their materials. Please keep in mind that it is the responsibility of the whole team, including the parent and the professionals on the IEP team, to make decisions and requests for AIM with enough lead time that the materials can be delivered in that timely manner. So the process for acquiring AIM after the request is made can sometimes be time-consuming. Sometimes the AIM center has to scan books or digitize text themselves or proof books that are coming from other sources. So make sure you and your team are allowing plenty of time to get those materials. So I wanted to show you this very complex diagram from a presentation that we do for special education personnel, just to show you how many steps and considerations there are when acquiring AIM. So I think it's important for parents to know and to understand that the process can take time, and really to stress that need for planning ahead. So also in acquiring AIM, parents have a responsibility to understand that many educational materials are protected by copyright, and that we have to follow procedures that keep us all on the right side of the law. Materials are made available to your child for his or her exclusive use. You cannot share them with other students or distribute them in any way to other parents. Materials are also only available for the school year in which they are used. So be sure to give materials back or delete them from your computer when the school asks you to do so. So the Delaware AIM Center has a website that the school uses to make requests for AIM and to track the progress of the materials. And this is what their website looks like. The website is primarily used by teachers and the digital rights managers at the schools, like I said, for tracking and requesting the materials. But there's also some great information and links there for parents. So in using AIM, again, the delivery tool is critical to your student's ability to use the many different forms of AIM. Be sure that the tool is in hand at the time when the AIM is received from the AIM Center, so that your student can make immediate use of those materials. You wouldn't want to have the materials and not be able to use them because you didn't have the correct device. So make sure that the delivery tool is part of what gets discussed and resolved when the IEP team is making those decisions about the AIM. So stressing again the need to plan ahead. Planning ahead is the most important thing that you can take away from this webinar. Talk to your IEP team about AIM. AIM is considered a special factor on the IEP. Special factors are those things at the top of the IEP that all IEP teams are required to talk about. So if you think your child might qualify for AIM, you can request to reconvene the IEP team around this specific topic. AIM might not be the only strategy for supporting a student with a print disability. Students may also qualify for more intensive reading instruction or a different type of reading instruction. The decision doesn't have to be an either-or one. Students may need AIM to be able to access their materials while still working on their independent reading skills. A single student may also need more than one type of AIM. For example, a student may only need to change the look of the print for math, but might also need audio support for long reading assignments. As I said before, all of these decisions are based on the unique needs of the student. One size does not fit all when it comes to accessible instructional materials. So don't wait until the next school year. Remember, it takes time and planning to acquire all these materials. Identify which materials need to be provided in accessible formats, so you do so as soon as possible, and also talk about what will be needed for the next school year. The earlier the request is made, the more likely it is that your child will have the materials on the first day of school. It's a good idea to talk with the IEP team about when and how the AIM will be delivered, who will do the assessment and when, and who will request the books and assistive technology. Identifying and documenting the responsibilities of the IEP team will ensure that everyone is clear about the role they play in getting AIM into your child's hands. One important thing for parents to know is that in order to have the passages read aloud in the English language arts portion of the Delaware State test, the student's IEP must state that the student qualifies for and is receiving AIM. There's a form from the Department of Education that needs to be filled out as well. School personnel have received training on how to fill out this form. Students only need to have this form filled out for the read aloud accommodation for the passages. These are the texts that the students read prior to answering the comprehension questions. When we talk about the read aloud accommodation, we mean that the text is read to the student either by a human reader or by using the text-to-speak function of a computer. It's important to note that there are other portions of the state test, for example, the test questions or the math items, where the students can get the text read to them, and they don't need to have this particular form on file. So one last thing I wanted to share with you was a few resources. Like I said earlier, Beth Minio is the director of the Delaware AIM Center, and she is here with me today to answer any questions you might have. And she also provides the training and assistance to schools, students, and families across the state. The Delaware AIM Center website, as I mentioned, is a good resource for teachers and for families. Sarah Celestin is the Delaware Department of Education contact for the Delaware AIM program. And lastly, the National Center on Accessible Instructional Materials has a lot of great information about AIM. The information that you saw in the video is on this on the National Center's website. So that concludes the information that I wanted to share today, and thank you for joining us. We have a few minutes for questions, and like I said, Beth is here with us today. So if there's anything anyone would wants to ask, go right ahead.
Hi, this is Midra again. This is just a reminder for those of you, if you have questions, for those of you that have called in, just make sure that you hit *6 to unmute yourself before you ask a question. And I don't see any questions in the chat portion, but I had a question. You mentioned about the new state assessment, Annalisa, and as we all know, this state assessment is being implemented within the next few weeks. Many students will begin the testing phase. What should parents do, or what questions should they be asking now in terms of making sure that their child has that read-aloud accommodation if they used it previously on the DCAS?
Well, as Annalisa mentioned, and this is Beth, hi everybody. As Annalisa mentioned earlier, in order to access the read aloud for the passage part of the English language arts part of the test, it has to be the student's need for AIM has to be documented in the IEP. Given the the fact that the start of testing is just around the corner, I don't know how readily IEP teams could mobilize to have these discussions and get the need for AIM documented prior to the start of the testing. But it's definitely worth a call to your child's teacher to see. I mean, you may be surprised. It may actually be something that is in the IEP, and you may not recall that it is. But if it's not, there still is a little bit of time to try to mobilize, get it documented in the IEP, and get that form completed and sent in to the Department of Education.
Great, thank you for sharing that information. Were there any other questions from participants? Okay. If you happen to think of something, this was a lot of information, and Beth and Annalisa, I just want to thank you again for taking the time out today to share this valuable information with our participants today. This is something that a lot of families, I'm sure, will appreciate the information that you shared today, in addition to your contact information. If anyone has any additional questions that come up afterwards, definitely send an email. You have the contact information that's showing. It should be showing on your screen now. You can also email us at picofdell@picofdell.org if you have any follow-up questions. Once again, thank you everyone for taking the time to participate in today's webinar. There will be a survey, a follow-up survey, if you could, that's going to come out at the conclusion of the webinar. If you could please take a few moments to complete that survey, that helps us, and your feedback helps us in terms of upcoming topics, upcoming presentations, and then also lets us know how we did. So if there are no further questions, we will conclude the webinar. And again, thank you everyone for participating today.